Welcome to Grounded, the home of mindfulness, meditation and self-observation. Today I'm tackling the subject of why am I unhappy, and we're going to do it in three parts. Now, the first understanding that we need to have is that although unhappiness seems personal, it's actually worldwide. Everybody is unhappy. Everybody that is living and everybody that has lived is unhappy. It's part of the human nature. It's part of the makeup of this reality. It's part of the process of truly understanding yourself. Now, when we have that very basic understanding, it gives us a unifying principle to begin to allow our walls to come down. Because it's our own personal unhappiness that builds, that creates these walls that doesn't allow us to truly love one another, to truly allow ourselves to be vulnerable. But the question is, why am I unhappy? Now, step one to really understanding your unhappiness is to truly acknowledge that you're unhappy. So what we do as human beings, the parts of us we don't want to acknowledge, we actually put onto the world. So if we're unhappy, it might sound a little bit like this: I'm unhappy because I don't have enough money. I'm unhappy because I don't have a great relationship. I'm unhappy because I hate my job. And you see that this unhappiness, it's a projection. We're pushing it away. We're blaming it on our reality. We're blaming it on circumstances of our lives. So the first step to healing unhappiness is to first acknowledge that I am unhappy. That unhappiness is not external, but it's internal. I feel this unhappiness. So that's step one. Step number two is understanding that although you have what you believe in your mind as unhappiness, unhappy thinking, first acknowledge that unhappiness is an emotion, is a feeling. Now, whenever you're unhappy, you're feeling an emotion. Whenever you're unhappy, you're feeling down. Whenever you're unhappy, you're feeling depressed. So unhappiness is not a thought. Unhappiness is an emotion. Step number three. When did I first feel this emotion? Because the emotion that you're feeling now is not a new emotion. It is an emotion that you've been carrying your whole life. And because we haven't looked at this emotion, because we haven't faced this emotion, because we haven't understood this emotion, we keep pushing it away. And in reality, keep spitting that reflection of that unhealed aspect back at you. So where was the emotion created? Now, all negative emotion in one person is first experienced externally. So, for this emotion to be created, for this unhappiness to be created, first, you would have been in a situation where somebody showed you their unhappiness, their negative emotion. And that will always take you back to your childhood. What happens is when an adult shows a child their own negative emotion, their own unhappiness, what it does is it creates an emotional response within the child. Now the emotional response that I'm talking to is the fight or flight mechanism. So when an adult is being emotional towards a child, this in turn creates the same negative response within the child. Now it's at this point when a child experiences a negative emotion from the parent that a child begins to add meaning to the emotion. Now a child doesn't understand that it's seeing an unhealed aspect in the parent. The child gets a reflection of that emotion, and having the emotion arise within the child gives the child gives meaning, interprets the emotion, gives meaning to the emotion. And this interpretation of the negative emotion creates beliefs, creates a story. So when we look at our personal sense of self, our constant thinking in our head, that is all developed through our childhood. Now, as a child, not being able to see that this is an unhealed aspect of the parent, the child becomes the reflection of that parent's unhealed emotion. And then the child begins to formulate a sense of self based on the beliefs, based on the interaction with the parent. So when we're in our adult lives 30, 40, 50 years later, this constant thinking that's going on in our head is not truly who we are. It is the reflection of the contact you had as a child. This is why I say unhappiness is not a new emotion. It is an old emotion resurfacing in the present. It is your past resurfacing in the present. So the 3 steps of unhappiness, the first one, we need to truly acknowledge that I'm unhappy, which will bring about a feeling. And then we need to understand that this feeling was first, and then third came the story we added to the feeling, the meaning we added to the feeling. So it comes back to being able to undo your own psychology, being able to, instead of staying in the story that you created as a child, whether that's not being good enough, whether that's feeling alone, whether that's feeling rejection, instead of staying in the story, if you stay in the story, you just repeat the cycle. Because the story has formulated your belief systems, and what you believe, you see. Now let me give an example of how this actually works. Now, especially speaking to the adults out there, you will notice that children have a constant need. They're constantly on our cases. You know, as parents, we have this responsibility to look after them. But if a child, when they're wanting a need met, if they're in a situation where a parent constantly suppresses their needs, and the parent might be something like, all you do is want from me. You never stop. It's one thing after another. And because this comes from an emotional place within the parent, because the parent wouldn't have had their needs met as a child, because it's generational, it goes on. But because that would cause a reaction in the parent would then, through a negative emotion, suppress the aspect in a child, saying stuff like, you're always wanting, you're always needing. So the child learns that needing something means emotion, means a negative response. Now the child will then actually create a belief in their head that my needs don't matter. I don't matter. from the very simplest thing, like suppressing our own child's wants, we create beliefs in our children that they are not worthy. And then that child will grow up with this belief, this construct of I am not worthy. And then their reality, because we create our reality through our beliefs, will reflect back unworthiness. And so if we stay focused on our reality, we never change anything. Nothing ever changes, because we don't address the fundamental reason as to why. Why is my reality reflecting back lack? Why is my reality reflecting back rejection? Why is my reality reflecting back a lack of love, a lack of joy? Your reality is always a true reflection of what is within. So that are 3 steps to understanding why you're unhappy. I'm going to do a quick recap. Step number 1, truly acknowledge and don't blame. Step number 2, understand you are dealing with an emotion. Become good at feeling, allowing. Step number 3, identify the story to which you have created the beliefs around the emotion. Because when you identify because when you identify the beliefs, you can allow the emotion and the beliefs to become part of yourself. Because what do we do with our unhappiness? We resist it. So we're only ever resisting ourselves. And I think that's a good cue to end this video. Anyway, plenty more content coming out. Keep up to date. Much love.